All right, so it is just about 9 a.m. sharp San Francisco time. So a huge hello and welcome to everyone joining us for this Hong Kong FinTech Week 2020 Global Roadshow. Today we are focusing on the Americas. This is the second roadshow in our global series, and still to come over the next few weeks, we will be hitting Europe and Africa, Australia and New Zealand, Middle East and India, and Greater China. My name is Hannah. I'm the head of FinTech Enterprise at FinTechHK. I will be your MC and moderator today. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a cast of fantastic speakers joining us from both the East and West Coasts of the USA. I myself am coming at you live from London, UK, and we also have speakers joining us from Hong Kong. So this truly is a global roadshow, and wherever you are in the world joining us today, a huge welcome and thank you for being here. Really excited for you. We've got a great panel discussion coming up today. We're going to be looking at some of the trends and developments in the fintech industry, both in Hong Kong and across the Americas, how we can bridge those two industries together, and some of the impacts potentially of the COVID-19 pandemic. But before we get to all of that, I would first like to invite Mr. Douglas Lee, the head of the New York, Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office, and Mr. Lawrence Tang, head of investment promotion at the Hong Kong Economic Trade Office in San Francisco, to first of all kick off this roadshow and really set the scene for us a little bit by giving us an overview of the fintech landscape in Hong Kong. So Douglas, over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. Welcome everyone from around the world to our Hong Kong FinTech Week Roadshow. I'm Douglas Lee with Invest Hong Kong in New York, and today we'll take a future look into FinTech in Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area. But before that, I want to thank FinTechHK and all of our other speakers, especially those speakers coming from Hong Kong, where it's late at night. So Invest Hong Kong is the department of the Hong Kong government. We help companies from around the world to expand and establish operations in Hong Kong. We help companies of all sizes and types, and we have dedicated teams for fintech and financial services. Hong Kong is among the world's top 10 fintech hubs in the world. We have over 600 fintech companies, and 37% of fintech company founders come from overseas. There are already 4 fintech unicorns in Hong Kong. And according to a recent survey by Ernst & Young, 67% of consumers in Hong Kong actively use fintech services. Now, fintech companies in Hong Kong have raised more than $1.5 billion over the past 6 years from private markets. And the government also has assortment of funding programs to help with the development of fintech companies. Also, for 6 of the past 10 years, the IPO market in Hong Kong has been the world's largest, and $10 billion US dollars have been raised of IPO money for fintech-related companies. The regulators in Hong Kong are also supportive too. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority has issued 8 virtual bank licenses so far, and the Insurance Authority grants virtual licenses too. The Securities and Futures Commission has announced regulations to allow virtual asset trading platforms to receive operating licenses. Now, every fintech hub also needs talent, and the Hong Kong government and industry offer various training programs to enhance the digital literacy of practitioners in the financial services industry. And 6 public universities in Hong Kong have rolled out bachelor's and master's degree programs related to fintech. Also, immigration facilitation is provided to experienced fintech professionals coming from overseas. So Hong Kong is ripe for what I call co-opetition. That's cooperation among competitors. According to a PwC report, 82% of financial service entities in Hong Kong plan to increase their level of engagement with fintech partners over the next 3 to 5 years. We also see that Hong Kong historically has been an international financial center. We have over 160 banks, which includes 70% of the world's largest. And we have 13 of the top 20 insurance companies worldwide operating in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is also the largest asset management hub in Asia, with over $2.5 trillion of assets under management. And we are the 5th largest private asset management center in the world. You'll hear all about this and more at our 5th annual Hong Kong FinTech Week in November, which last year drew more than 12,000 participants. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague in San Francisco, Lawrence Tang.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. So I'll follow up with Douglas' point that there are unicorns in Hong Kong. So I will touch upon 3 points, which are all related to opportunities. First of all, Hong Kong is a city of 7 million people, but interesting enough, we have 8 unicorns already. And more interestingly, 4 of these 8 are in the fintech space. So one of them, WeLab, is in the mobile credit. And then BitMax is a digital asset trading platform services, Air Wallet, cross-border payment, and TNG is an e-wallet. It's spread over quite a wide range of fintech services. And not only local unicorns, but recently we see a big San Francisco headquartered unicorn, SoFi, personal finance. They are coming to Hong Kong to jumpstart their business for Hong Kong and also Asia Pacific. So it's a good place to grow your company. So in order for companies to become a unicorn, of course, first of all, you need a market, a good, big, and fast-growing market. So Hong Kong is the place because based in Hong Kong, you can do China, you can do Asia Pacific as a whole. So let me also put it in another way. What's that market? Let me highlight, if you can imagine putting together Silicon Valley, New York, and Las Vegas together, the world top tech center, the world financial center, and entertainment center. So you will have in Hong Kong, in our part of the market, the Greater Bay Area of Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau, which is the equivalent of China's Silicon Valley, the financial capital, financial hub, and then Macau, the entertainment center. It's a big market of 70 million people right there. So in that part of the market, if you are based in Hong Kong, you can do something that you cannot do elsewhere. For example, capture some of the China customers. For example, the capital markets. In Hong Kong, there is a special arrangement with mainland China called the Shanghai Hong Kong Stock Connect and also Shenzhen Hong Kong Stock Connect, whereby investors and customers in mainland China, through Hong Kong, this arrangement, they can invest in the Hong Kong stock market. And also foreigners and also Hong Kong people can invest in China share market, capital markets. So that is very unique in Hong Kong. And then beyond the market, of course, company need to raise capital. So raising fund is one of the strongest area in Hong Kong. We have a very strong VC and PE community in Hong Kong. And also the Hong Kong government provide lots of support, infrastructure, and most importantly, funding support. For example, one of the scheme is called Enterprise Support Scheme, which is a dollar-to-dollar matching grant. And then the more important adjective is that it is not dilutive. So the government, after providing funding to the company, is not taking shares or your equity or your IP. Another very active program is called the IT Innovation Tab Venture Fund, which is targeting at startup companies at their Series A stage of the funding. So in a nutshell, for the 3 points that I covered relate to opportunities, companies want to grow to become a unicorn. They need to find a market, Hong Kong, China, Asia Pacific, and then with fundraising, with capital raising in Hong Kong, then that is the path that the companies can take. So back to you, Hannah. So it is quick and short.
Thank you very much, Douglas and Lawrence. Right, just before we launch into our panel discussion, I want to give everyone on this roadshow a really exclusive sneak peek at what we have coming up for you at Hong Kong FinTech Week 2020. The event takes place between the 2nd and the 6th of November this year in Hong Kong. But more excitingly and more importantly, Hong Kong FinTech Week 2020 is going virtual in a really big way this year. With everything going on at the moment, we're not sure what the travel situation will be come November. And that is why we are super excited to announce that we are bringing you the content, the networking, and the business opportunities that Hong Kong FinTech Week is famous for, that you can access on the virtual platform from the comfort of your own home. What does that mean for FinTech Week in terms of numbers? Well, with everyone logging on from around the world, we're expecting more than 25,000 attendees from more than 70 economies, who will listen to 350 plus speakers on stage across multiple tracks of content covering lots of different fintech verticals and horizontals. And with everyone logging on for multiple days of the conference, we're expecting more than 4,000 meetings to take place across our virtual matchmaking app. Now, Hong Kong FinTech Week is famous for bringing world-class speakers to the stage, and that will not be any different this year. We're bringing the most exciting global fintech companies and the founders with the most interesting backstories to the stage for you to understand their journeys and what they're up to now. And some of the content that we'll be looking at in more detail is the rise of tech fin in China. What are the huge companies doing in the technology space in China, and how will that impact on the rest of the fintech industry around the world? We'll also take a deep dive into innovative technology, looking behind the headlines and seeing what some of the real practical applications for things such as artificial intelligence, distributed ledger technology, and blockchain are. And as mentioned, we want you to be able to network with the people that you come to conferences to network with. And so to that end, we have created an AI-powered, really efficient, really smooth matchmaking virtual platform. You can connect with people, send messages, book meetings, and host video calls to make your networking experience the smoothest and the most efficient that it can be. One of our most exciting initiatives this year is our Global Fast Track program. This is a B2B matchmaking experience and allows you, and I expect many of our audience on this roadshow today, to take advantage of this. It allows you to put your products and solutions in front of senior executives from Hong Kong's major financial institutions, investors, and regulators. I cannot stress enough how many benefits this program brings you. It allows you to connect with corporates and investors, as mentioned, but it also gives you practical support from some of those grants and funds that were mentioned earlier, up to $2.6 million of funding available. We're also working with investors to provide an investment commitment for the overall Fast Track champion of up to $1 million. Applications are open now. You can find the application form online, fintechweek.hk/fast track. It's completely free to participate in, and you can do it all 100% virtually. So now that we've got an understanding of what the fintech landscape is like in Hong Kong and what's coming up at Hong Kong FinTech Week, I'd now like to dive into our panel discussion. And I'm honored today to be joined by some really distinguished speakers. We have Mr. Calvin Choi, the Chairman and CEO of Amtd. Amtd are the strategic partner of Hong Kong FinTech Week this year, and also one of our fast track corporate champions. So you could be pitching your products and solutions to Amtd if you apply for the program. I'm also joined by Mr. Michael Kashmarsky, the Senior Manager of FinTech for the Americas from Invest Hong Kong, Mr. Mikhail Abdullah, the Senior Vice President International at SoFi, and Mr. Charles Dossi, the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Consensus. So I would like to remind everyone that you can pop your questions for our panelists into the Q&A box at any time. And first of all, I want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. I'm going to kick off with a question for Calvin. Seeing as we're talking today about fintech, across Hong Kong and the Americas, I'd like to ask you a little bit about Amtd's listing on the New York Stock Exchange. You're a homegrown Hong Kong company, lots of global activity. How has listing in New York supported your global growth so far?
Thanks, Hannah. Very glad to be here speaking to all the panelists. and also everyone online. I think from Amtd side, we are a homegrown, Hong Kong headquartered financial institution. We built it out, from a small idea, as I talk about it, into hopefully some big ideas connecting with the world. So the forward idea actually represent each of the 4 verticals. The I is Amtd International, which includes our investment banking businesses and also asset management. So we bring this the Amtd International, listed last year on NYC. So being the first Hong Kong homegrown financial institution to list on NYC. And in fact, very meaningfully, the stock code, we use HKIB, so representing Hong Kong Investment Bank. And subsequently, I think we continue to connect the dots. I think we are also listed now, dual listed on the Singapore Exchange with the stock code HKB, so representing Hong Kong banking. So I think onward to your question, Hannah, I think, of course, this will be important. First of all, I think as an entrepreneur, as a company growing into more size and scale, that we need to connect with more funding channels. I think the listing, of our equity, of course, will expose us, into the global vast community of institutional investors or other types of investors. I think it helps, of course, from the capital standpoint that we raise the money, from internationally and bringing it back into Hong Kong and to grow it, in terms of, what, our officers from HKDTC talk about it, growing into the Greater Bay opportunities. And secondly, I think it's also in terms of profiling that I think as a Hong Kong global investment bank, that we are not only growing within our Hong Kong city. Hong Kong, I think, is a very international financial global center, but we are also a super connector. So we connect from dots to dots, places to places. So I think it will be very much important for us to build our global investment bank, that we extend the outreach to go all the way into Wall Street and connecting the dots into Southeast Asia and back into Hong Kong.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Calvin. Some really interesting points about going outward from Asia to Americas there. I'd now like to ask Mikhail, and we can perhaps look at it from a slightly different angle, because at SoFi, you're a great example of a US company investing into Asia. What can others learn from this experience? And perhaps, do you have any advice for seeking successful partnerships to bridge, the States to Hong Kong?
Yes, absolutely. I think, first and foremost, I think we're going to continue to see a trend of US fintech companies moving internationally. I think it's, very true to say that competition's heating up across all categories in the US. And I think more and more we're going to see companies looking towards Asia and Europe and other regions to diversify. So I think it's the beginning of a trend. And with SoFi, prior to joining SoFi, I had started a company in Hong Kong called 8 Securities, which was recently acquired by SoFi. So I have a bit of a unique perspective, being an American who sort of originally moved to Asia to start a business, which was then acquired by a US company. I think Hong Kong is going to benefit, sort of despite what we hear in the news, just because it is, I think, culturally quite close to the US. And I think it's especially true for licensed fintech companies. The reality is, if you are a licensed business, you're contending with regulation in the US. That regulation is very, very similar in Hong Kong. And so as a result, I think we find that a lot of American companies, including SoFi, feel comfortable using Hong Kong as a hub from which to begin their sort of Asia expansion, just because I think it is a fairly comfortable move for an American company.
Fantastic. I think that's a really interesting point, actually, about using Hong Kong as the launchpad for their expansion in Asia. And that leads me nicely, actually, on to asking Charles. Charles, you were really key in opening, your company's branch in Hong Kong. Has there been anything about that process that has surprised you? And what advice would you give to international companies looking to open regional hubs?
That's a great question. Nothing surprised me because I've been assisting quite a few companies to open their business in Hong Kong. So I was very familiar with the process. And honestly, starting your business in Hong Kong or opening a branch for a US company, in my case, Consensus, was extremely smooth. what I let the company discover when I started the operations for Consensus in Hong Kong is really the ecosystem that we find here in Hong Kong. There is obviously a blend of entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs with Asian background, international entrepreneurs, and a very strong appetite for digital finance in general. And what was probably very surprising to the company in general was the level of competition there is here. I think Hong Kong is sometimes called the New York of Asia, and there is the energy in the city. There is a competition, and competition is something we are all looking for. I think when you're an entrepreneur, you're a competitive person. You want your company and your team to succeed, and it's really an environment where it's really in the NDA of the city to get competition and to succeed. And for us, it's a great environment. Consensus is a global leader in terms of blockchain engineering for financial markets, with 170 banks and 600 stockbrokers and many more insurance companies. There is really plenty of conversation to start and infrastructure to build. The regulators are also working on digital assets, should it be the HKMA with CBDCs or the SFC with digital asset regulations. So it's overall very supportive and very exciting.
Fantastic, thank you.
I just would like to interrupt 1 minute. Something also maybe you forgot to mention about the FinTech Week is this human touch. Yes, there is a lot of speakers and everything, but if we look at the panel you bring together tonight, I feel there is so many friends. We all obviously know each other, but one part of the event is this human touch. It's great to be able to spend a few minutes with Calvin Choi and get some news about the company. And you know you're going to meet him either virtually or on the floor, and he's going to share always some insights. Same for Mikhail from Amtd Securities, and now SoFi here. These people have great stories. And there is this human touch of the FinTech Week, which I always look forward to get and enjoy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles. That's a really good point, actually. And I think that's something that we're really striving to bring together through that virtual platform, is to maintain that human touch and bring together, as you say, fantastic speakers with those opportunities to have a chat with people. So yeah, it's fantastic that you mentioned that. Thank you. Also, really interesting to mention the supportive ecosystem, the entrepreneurial spirit in Hong Kong, and how that's kind of helped you to grow in the region. I'd like to ask Michael, actually, from the government perspective, what do you consider, sort of Asia's competitive advantage as a region, and why should international companies be looking to launch their operations in Asia?
Sure. Good morning to everyone. Good evening to everyone. Great to see a lot of familiar faces. I think both Lawrence in San Francisco and Douglas in New York already made some really good points about why Hong Kong, and the points about Hong Kong can be also extended in general to Asia. It's a very dynamic, very quickly growing region. And I don't think really we're going to reinvent the wheel here, coming with any other ideas. But really what can be very attractive in this market is the pace of change. For me, sitting here in Silicon Valley, but also having the European perspective, I'm originally from Poland, it's very refreshing to see another region which is moving really, really fast, which to an extent is not afraid to kind of move fast and break things. And there's this really entrepreneurial spirit that you can feel in many places in Asia, not just in Hong Kong. I feel Southeast Asia is very interesting from that perspective as well. And for growth, for the search of new opportunities, Asia is amazing. Hong Kong also, particularly for those that are looking to expand for those who are not from Hong Kong, who look to expand. As Charles mentioned, as Michael mentioned, they were not born in Hong Kong. They were able to successfully establish their companies. So this can be replicated in many other locations in Asia as well, that you can successfully build a business, even though not necessarily you might know everything how to navigate yourself in your company.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. So we've touched on sort of, opening offices in Asia and looking at Hong Kong as a regional hub. Let's maybe dive into some more sort of fintech specific questions. So Calvin, for you at Amtd, you're involved in two key markets in Asia for virtual banking, Hong Kong and Singapore. In terms of virtual banking, how do you think these challenges will be competing against more established banks?
I think that the virtual bank, of course, is a great license giving by Hong Kong, by different markets, I think in Asia, that making the financial services world more innovative. I think with this new form of banking, I think ultimately, I think the key purposes of virtual banking or digital financial services are more to serve the underserved, to enable the enabler, and support the supporter. I think for the overall community building, but also for the overall fintech, the digitalization of the overall market. So I see actually more in terms of collaboration, cooperative power in between the fintech and the traditional FI. And I would want to see that, I think the overall market have been also promoting more collaboration between the fintechs and the traditional ones. And in fact, if you just name a few of the cooperation areas like corresponding banking, like interbanking, I think like, in terms of different multi-diversity areas, no matter the retail, wholesale, or into large corporate, how the different, nature of banking can collaborate to provide more value creation power. I think ultimately, in this market now, customers are in greater power. So I think what they need, I think, is really a holistic solution game. Then I see that, the fintech and the traditional players, there are lots of, grounds for them to cooperate, but also not just in a single market, but also cross-market. I think ultimately what we see that for all these digital licenses right now, they only allow the players to operate in a single market, in a single country. Of course, banking, is highly regulated businesses. So ultimately, it's really about how I see as opportunity to connect all the dots. So from when you talk about Hong Kong and Singapore, but these are not the markets only operating, digital banking or digital licenses. So I think, from Amtd standpoint, I think we are actually eyeing into the major markets, the active markets in Asia. So I think not just Hong Kong, Singapore, but the vast, Asian market. I think we see lots of, value creation power or innovative power, or as you said, Hannah, the entrepreneurship power. That I think we look forward to seeing more interesting model or the new norm, comparing to the previous traditional model.
Thank you, Calvin. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to talk about sort of cooperation and partnership rather than necessarily this kind of view of challenging and disrupting now. I think you're right, we're moving into that more sort of collaborative phase. And I think you mentioned right at the end there, sort of a new normal and sort of a rise of digitization, which obviously I think has been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've all had to adapt to new changes there. So I'd like to ask Mikhail, actually, if you've seen any changes to your business, as a result of the pandemic, and if you've seen any fintechs that were perhaps already, very digitally savvy, but have they had to change their focus, or how have they successfully shifted their focus in response to the pandemic?
Yeah, so we're in a relatively unique situation. So to give you some perspective, this quarter has been our strongest ever. And all across all of our metrics, whether it's new customers, new deposits, transactions, are up over 800% year over year. And even Q2 versus Q1, we saw over 300% growth across all of those metrics. So we're seeing an enormous amount of deposits coming into the business. I think that there are sort of a few categories in fintech that have benefited just because, in Hong Kong, for example, it's so convenient to just walk into a branch, and that convenience to some extent was taken away. So people are looking for a new model of convenience, and being a mobile-only business, I think we benefited from that. I think this growth isn't unique to SoFi. I think a lot of consumer fintech companies are experiencing this today. So our challenge is not about retraction and changing the way we do business. Our challenge, honestly, is about scaling and, to some extent, taking advantage of this opportunity to grow, our members, grow our base. So for us, it's been a little bit counterintuitive, but the reality is there's been a lot of growth.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we've heard about sort of virtual banking, and then from SoFi's perspective as well on kind of the impact of the pandemic. Charles, are you able to give us any examples of companies that you've seen that have been successfully leveraging blockchain technology, and maybe any that have sort of seen any changes because of the pandemic?
Absolutely. When you look at, so Consensus is mostly servicing the financial industry with blockchain and digital asset infrastructure. And the public use case I can share with you is, for example, a company called Congo, which is a commodity trading platform bringing together 10 banks to trade and deal with all the flow of trading with oil. This platform is managing today $1 billion of transactions. And it's really helping this business line for these commodity traders to be much more efficient and much more profitable. And some of these activities and some of these traders are here based in Asia, and we've been assisting them to connect to the platform we built for this consortium. We worked also with the MAS in Singapore within the project Ubin to help with some CBDC projects. We also built in Singapore a platform called One Exchange for one of our customers called CapBridge. It's a platform which is really, I would say, on the edge of digital finance, looking at how you can digitalize and tokenize assets and enable SMEs and many more assets to be consumed in a new and much more efficient way. So there is many different topics where the technology is moving forward and helping the people in the world of capital market, in lending. We built recently in a lending platform here in Hong Kong based on stable coins. So there is absolutely a large spectrum of use cases. And this, if we touch on the COVID-19 topic, to be totally transparent with you, some of the projects are in standby because companies have suddenly an agenda which is reprioritize on the different digital projects, and some projects have basically been accelerated and doubled down in terms of size and budget. So overall, it's a very busy period for us at Consensus. We have team in Asia Pacific in Hong Kong where we are managing all the Asia Pacific activities. We have team in Singapore, in Australia, and Japan. So all of these different market touch would give us a very busy agenda, and we are very excited about 2020. It's going to be a great year for Consensus.
Fantastic, thank you. And interesting to hear that, as you say, projects have accelerated and things have moved forward, quickly through all the crises that's been happening. Maybe just to kind of to wrap up, looking at the impact of COVID, Michael, in a sort of a very general and kind of high level sense, what do you think the next 12 months holds for FinTech in general around the world, responding to COVID-19, or what kind of changes do you think we'll see?
I think that's a large question to kind of cover
question.
The whole world. So maybe I'll focus actually on Hong Kong and what we see and what we expect to carry on moving forward. What we have seen in the past couple of months as pretty much reinforcing what we've observed as a FinTech team for the past 4 years. So most of the companies that were going to Hong Kong and looking at Hong Kong were within B2B space, choosing Hong Kong particularly because of the number of banks and insurance companies. In the past couple of months, I think what became particularly relevant was those companies asking, because they come to us and ask us to get in touch with banks or insurance companies, potential business partners. Number one question is, how is your product relevant to the new normal and the new reality? Is this going to help my bank, or is this going to help my insurance company operate remotely? Is it going to help me encrypt my data? Is it going to help my customers to do contactless payments? And companies often, because everyone is of course aware of the situation, companies often take that spin and then spin their products so it can actually be functioning in response to the current situation. And we of course expect that as the situation kind of goes back and forth within the pandemics, as much as we hope, it's going to go away, we expect that this is still going to be a relevant question. Any technologies that help companies operate remotely, that help banks provide the kind of contactless payments, that all will be in demand, we expect. And another thing that I think it's not necessarily only relevant to to fintech, but potential business partners look even more right now at the company's sort of infrastructure from the business perspective, meaning how many customers have you managed to secure under the normal circumstances? How much funding do you have secured? It always was a relevant question when companies were looking to expand internationally, but it became even more important now when sometimes those business conditions are more challenging.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think that's some really clear guidance on what we think will be really important for companies moving forward. So I'd like to come back to Calvin now. So Calvin, you mentioned before about sort of moving into a focus on cooperation and collaboration. And your Amtd SpiderNet actually encompasses a huge network of partners, banks, fintechs, corporates. How important are partnerships for fintech development, and what is the right strategy when you're looking to build a partnership?
I think partnership is actually one of the most important key, I think, in this the new norm as we talk about it. I think for fintech, I think in the future, it's about partnership, but it's really about the community connectivity, or we call the ecosystem. So I think, as I build out Amtd, I think I focus more into building our ecosystem proprietary for our own, but then working just on a traditional financial institution building. So now that the overall SpiderNet, as I'm happy for you to also know the name, right? And for this particular ecosystem, I'm seeing it as more connecting with all these, business partners, stakeholders, or cooperative, partners working on creating values. Ultimately thinking about, I think, two key items, right? One, I think, is to connecting the dots, but the dots connecting to creating values together. So I think the values will be something focusing into might not be your core value, but I create, more values out of your non-core to become the core. So I think, the overall basis is to, make value creation, to align the interests of everyone, or making every relationship between each other more sticky, more long-term. That's the word of SpiderNet, right? Spiderweb, connecting more with different others. But I think secondly, I think it's really about not connecting with just company, but connecting with people, connecting with the entrepreneurs. So I think we focus a lot into talents. So very happy also as we talk about Hong Kong, with lots of multi-diversity talents, global talents here. But we work very much onto committing ourselves to groom and to cultivate the next talent. So we have had built the first fintech school in Hong Kong with the Polytechnic University. Now that, as the HKDTC earlier talked about, that we produce lots of the university into bachelor programs, master program. But in fact, in Hong Kong, we also have this PhD program, now giving out PhD degree in fintech. So we already now, carrying out the first class, but now onward to getting the second incoming class. So I think hopefully, I think altogether we join force, not only to build out a wider ecosystem, I think, from Hong Kong, but also building out, a very rich and talent pool, out from Hong Kong to support, I think, for the many years of future fintech development.
Fantastic. So your strategy is about creating value for everyone in the chain and nurturing the next generation of talent as well. So looking still at strategy then, as a kind of a theme now, Mikhail, what would you say is the right strategy or a good strategy for foreign companies to successfully adapt to new markets such as Hong Kong?
I think first and foremost, and this is just coming from experience, both sort of at E-Trade, where I worked for 10 years and was responsible for taking E-Trade from the US into 15 new markets. I think the critical thing is just the team. I think you have to start that process with finding the right, local team on the ground to build a business. It just simply doesn't work. Taking people from the U.S., moving them into a new market and expecting them to be successful. So I think that's critical. First and foremost, it's the team. I think in addition to that, I think partnerships do help. So in my previous experience, for example, we'd launched a business in Japan, and that's one market that I would sort of say is very, very important to have a domestic partner in order to be successful. I think these are two strategies that every company that is looking to expand internationally should adopt, because I think without them, it just makes it substantially harder.
Excellent. Fantastic. I'd just like to remind our audience that you can pop questions for our panelists into the Q&A box. I think I've got one or two more questions up my sleeve, and then I'm going to move to the audience questions. So Charles, this one's for you. In your experience, how does fintech in the US and across the Asia Pacific differ, and what can these two markets learn from each other?
I probably have a bias, having spent so much time here in Hong Kong and working with mainland Chinese customers and customers in Asia Pacific. I think there is not so much legacy system in Asia overall, so it makes the companies building their infrastructure, looking at their business model in a very different way, and they don't start with the same kind of assets. And there is also a customer base which is, I would say, digital by default. Many of the consumers and companies here in Asia have been digital from day one. They consume everything via their mobile phone, and they haven't been through the transformation phase that you might still be observing in Europe and the US. So it's very important to come with being humble in Asia and look around and do some exploration trips to really understand what is the state of the market before coming with your offer. And I guess what the Western markets can learn from Asia is this ambitious and relentless appetite to be launching new product, to be growing cross-border. There is obviously the Chinese market where Chinese entrepreneurs have a lot to cover, but there is also a lot of smaller markets in Asia which allow entrepreneurs to go cross-border, and you see beautiful companies out of Hong Kong, Singapore, and some other countries where their local market is not enough for their growth over many years, so they have to expand. And this creates some very interesting companies which are cross-border and international from day one, and that's very interesting to see how you can shape a strategy to come in Asia and to say, okay, you will choose a base in Asia, and probably Hong Kong is a very strong candidate for that. And look at how from Hong Kong, you will be not only servicing your local customers, but servicing also the regional customers. And you might not have the same kind of company strategies when you are a European company or an American company, because your national market are big enough and they're going to keep you busy for several years. So I think this is something which can be a strong learn from entrepreneurs expanding here in Hong Kong.
Yeah, absolutely. The experience and the strategy is not necessarily going to be the same for every company, entering a market because of the differences in their own home market. It's a really good point. Right, I'm now going to move to some audience questions. And the first one is from Michael from Invest Hong Kong. What do you consider to be the most compelling areas of fintech in Asia in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? And what is the role of large financial institutions, collaborator or build their own?
So that's the question to me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, anything that helps to switch to digital, of course. And so we see that within the 4 or 5 subsectors. This would be, and all within the realm of B2B. And this would be blockchain related technologies, insurtech, regtech, which is one of the fastest growing subsectors and industries that we see, credit tech, and also wealth tech. And interestingly, we have both the personal finance wealth tech companies here and also blockchain. So, they're well represented in this panel. In terms of collaboration, whether build on your own, we do see that there's definitely a trend coming from banks to look at companies that they can collaborate with. Also, we see that Hong Kong is particularly interesting for those that enable financial institutions to operate better rather than those that are trying to disrupt. Disruption is a very kind of attractive term in the startup world, but really with the amount of banks and insurance companies in Hong Kong and with the very strong financial backing that they can provide, it's in companies' best interest to try and enable them to be more up to speed with new technologies rather than to try to replace them entirely, especially in such a regulated field as fintech or financial services.
Gotcha, thank you. And some of the verticals that you mentioned there, RegTech, Wealth Tech, these are all verticals that we are focusing on for our Fast Track program for Hong Kong FinTech Week. These are going to be, huge areas. So if you're a company operating in these areas, make sure you apply online today. I've had a question in for Calvin. Hi, is there any proven strategy for Asian FinTech going into Western markets successfully, for example, America or Europe?
I think the best solution, I think, is to engage with your local partners, your local friends. I think I still recall that, many years ago, when I started to get exposed into the US FinTech, I made a good partnership with Lendit. I think through the big organization there that we participated a lot into their conferences and also being a speaker there, we make lots of new friends. And in fact, find my first fintech investment in the States, and later on, got a very good exit. Over time, I think bringing that company in particular to list in Asia. I think on an overall basis, I think it's really about then going back to the partnership approach, but the local championship, right? I think we all need more friends, but the friends, for the local. So I think that's also, the how we believe into the particular model of Amtd, that we see it very importantly, the word global. So be international, but be very local. I think embrace, into the local space, no matter in terms of talents and also in terms of the local champion. I think that's for one. And secondly, I think it's really in terms of, finding areas that you can add value to your local friends or your foreign partners. I think, they will all offer, more values to you, I think, to opening up new doors for you. But equally, I think you can be the trusted partner for your local. I think, so how to connect the dots and, meet the East and the West. I think something that I think we, as connectors from Hong Kong, but also onward to the different places, I think that should be the core of how we strike, I think, the next partnership.
Thank you, Calvin. I absolutely adore the concept of global, of embracing local to achieve your global goals. So I think that's super important. Thank you. I've had another question in from the audience. This one is for Mikhail. Our audience member says that American FinTech entering Asia, the Asian market is quite unusual. How did you meet SoFi, and how did those interactions progress, and how did you move that whole process forward?
Yes, so we were approached by SoFi a little over a year ago, and the transaction was actually closed just 3 months ago. So it was a relatively long process, but I think with respect to the rationale of why SoFi acquired 8 Securities, so an American fintech company coming to Asia, they had a real purpose that they wanted to build a global brand and a global business. They didn't want to just simply be a domestic US business. I think it was helpful that the CEO of SoFi was actually, prior to taking that role, was a COO of Twitter. I think it's an interesting perspective because I believe about 70% of Twitter's business or users are outside of the US. So I think he came into SoFi with a very sort of global mind frame. I think when they approached us, I think they did the deal for sort of 3 reasons. I think one was just, cultural fit. It just felt very comfortable. The teams meshed very, very easily. I think number 2 was one of strategy, where they're a mobile first business. We were a mobile first business in Hong Kong. So strategically, it made sense. And I think, and then the third was just for, for technology. We had technology in Hong Kong that allowed us to enter new markets relatively easily. So, I think there are very practical reasons for doing that acquisition, but I think bigger picture, just SoFi had a view that they wanted to be an international business. They had a view that they wanted to start in Asia. They had a view that Hong Kong was the logical first step in that Asia expansion. And to their credit, through the protests and COVID and everything else, they stuck with it and we got the deal done. So very fortunate that that happened.
Okay, excellent. So from your perspective, SoFi, made the approach to you guys based on the strategy that they already had.
Correct.
Okay, excellent. Okay. I've had another question come in. This one's for Charles, for Consensus. Is Consensus planning to expand into other APAC regions, and if so, where?
So we are operating already in Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and Japan. So that's a solid footprint, to be honest with you. Let's see how some conversation is running with a government from Southeast Asia, and we might have a light operation over there. But we are in the digital business. We have an existing strong footprint, and we don't need to be physically in every single market. I think out of Hong Kong and operations in Singapore, we are covering very, very widely the core of the market, with Hong Kong helping us to cover all the north of Asia, and Singapore helping us to cover all our customers in Southeast Asia. And this is really the two hubs where you want to start. And then if the business drives you to some other location, and there is a meaningful, there is a reason for you to move over there, open an office, and hire locally, we are happy to do it. But for now, it's a strong footprint enough.
Excellent. Okay.
Anna, can I crash a little bit with your roadmap?
Please do.
I have questions for the panelists. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Because all of you are kind of OG, as we say in the world of tech. You are in the world of fintech, and you are participants of the FinTech Week for a long time. And my question is the following to Calvin, Mike, Mika, and Michael later on maybe. What is your best memory of the FinTech Week so far? I know you've been attending all of them. You had booth, you've been supporting the events so much. And what is the highlight? Which event or which people have you met? If you can share maybe in 1 minute your best memory from the FinTech Week, that would be fantastic. Calvin.
I think I have no choice but to say it's you, Charles. Right? So I think, I have actually made lots of good friends and seeing some new partners, good partners. Honestly, I enjoy very much our partnership, I think, Charles, and also the partnership with Finnovatia, with Anthony, and also with the Finnovatia team. I think, all of you have done a tremendous job creating this Hong Kong FinTech event to make it kind of like to become more mature and growing, not only in terms of the size of the participant, but also making it into more world connected. So I think, from our end, I think this coming year will be our third consecutive year as the strategic partner to the whole event. So I think, as we said before, but now that, I think we are even more committed to be embracing the event. So we would want to be part of the event, I think, for the more near future and into the longer term future. But to make more friends, but I think to creating, some, new opportunities, out of the previous friendship or partnership, but into building out something new and exciting. So I think the interaction points, I think, will be very much important. So this year, I think the matching program, I think, is a brilliant idea. So we look forward to it.
Mike, Mikhail, your best memory from the FinTech Week?
So best memory is I actually did the keynote at the very first FinTech Week. And it was a relatively small room compared to what the conferences look like today. But really honored to have had the opportunity to do that. And I remember I led with a slide. And it was a reference to Game of Thrones, and all it said was winter is coming, and it had fintechs, surrounding a castle with traditional banks and lenders sort of hunkered inside. And I think I spent most of my talk sort of convincing the crowd that winter is coming, the fintechs are coming. it's maybe taken a little bit longer than I'd hoped, but it's happening.
Fantastic. Mikael from San Francisco, your best memory for the FinTech Week? You did quite a few as well.
Right, and I think one of the most vivid, apart from our karaoke, which you know, it's still hard to forget. But on a more professional side, I think one of the situations last year when I was running from a meeting to a meeting and I was really tired, and at some point I thought, okay, time to like slow down and maybe sit somewhere in one of the sections. So I went to the PwC tent, I think. And I literally just wanted to have a coffee and then eat a muffin. And then all of a sudden, the HKMA FinTech representative came to have a chat. And then a lady that co-founded the main Angel Hub website. And all of a sudden, there were all those very important stakeholders sitting and chatting. And this just happened organically. And for me, being based day-to-day in San Francisco, but being also charged with linking companies from Americas to Hong Kong, you know, I don't see you guys every day. I don't have this type of connection in the physical world, which we used to have a lot until this year. So it was very important that actually at the event like this, you can very easily meet all the important people, and really the quality of meetings is important. And on that note, also, I just wanted to mention that although this year might be quite extraordinary in many ways, I think there is a huge opportunity, even if you plug into the event virtually, because this is a really great way to start building your networks in Asia, and they really matter. So I feel that those companies that are planning on participating virtually, they are also making a very good decision. I think it's going to enable a lot of companies to participate.
Fantastic. I think it's a good point. There is, when you attend the event, you get basically at reach some of the top entrepreneurs. You've got people coming from China, you've got billionaires, you chat with someone, he will tell you, I've got 100 million customers. It's something which is really mind-blowing. One very strong memory, and it's a kind of a memory which has been repeating itself for me when I was with the team organizing the FinTech Week, is to see working on the FinTech Week for so many months, and as organizer, we work on paper essentially, and we've got like designers doing 3Ds of things, and we've got partners confirming their commitment, but all of this is basically on paper. And the night before the event, before the opening, you eventually come into the big halls and you realize, wow. You realize the size, you realize the space you're going to be within 3 days. You realize what the commitment of your partners and the commitment of the companies years after years means, and how much they invest more and more into the event because the event is growing. And it's just super rewarding for all the team. And I guess I'm going to repeat what you mentioned also, Mikael, is whenever you spend time within the event, it's very intense because you get so many things and so many information, so much energy in the room. But you get to meet the people you sometimes see on the press here and there, the people which are like model entrepreneurs. They are all at reach during this event, and it's a very unique opportunity. It's super energizing and inspiring. So we look forward to the many more FinTech Weeks in the future. And you, Anna, what is your best memory of the FinTech Week?
Thank you, Charles. So FinTech Week 2018 was my first FinTech Week, and my role was to work with lots of different international governments, trade associations, to bring delegations over. And I had much the same reaction as you when I walked in that first day and I saw these big international stands, and I saw the companies were here, and then I saw them, signing MOUs and doing deals over the 2 days of the conference, and that was super rewarding experience for me. So that's probably my highlight takeaway. Thank you so much for asking that, Charles. It's actually really interesting and lovely to hear people's memories of this event, and to know that sentiment is carried forwards, and Hong Kong FinTech Week 2020 will be, even better, and people will be there enjoying it, whether it's virtual, or in person. So thank you so much for that. We are just about out of time here, so I'm gonna wrap things up. I would like to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers, especially those of you joining us from Hong Kong, where it is already technically tomorrow for you guys. So thank you so much, and thank you to all of our audience as well. We'll be sending out a recording of the roadshow to you, so you can find out more information about FinTech Week then. And in the meantime, we hope to see you at the FinTech Week event itself.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.